Yo, what's going on, guys? Today I'm going to be ranking my top 10 favorite movies that released in 2021. I also plan on doing a follow-up video to this, which is going to be ranking my top 10 most anticipated movies that are releasing in 2022. But today, we're just going to do my top 10 from 2021. So these are movies that released in 2021, not just movies that I watched. Not all of these movies have I talked about on this channel yet. Some of them I have reacted to, some of them I had reviewed, but not all of them have I said even a single word about on this channel before. So it's going to be fun to kind of go through my top 10 favorite movies and just let you guys know which ones I liked the most. Keep in mind, this is my list, so no, don't go in the comments saying, oh, what about this, what about that? If it's not on this list, either I didn't see it or I just didn't like it enough to put it in my top 10, but definitely give me your lists down in the comment section. I also have not seen every movie, obviously, that released in 2021. I have only seen like 28 movies that released in 2021, which is not a crazy amount of movies, so keep that in mind when you're watching this video. And yeah, so first of all, I want to give some honorable mentions to two movies that just missed the top 10. I really enjoyed these two movies, but I just don't enjoy them as much as my top 10 spots. This is Dune and Shang-Chi. So both these movies I really enjoyed, but for two completely different reasons. Like Dune, I think I appreciated more than I actually enjoyed, like on a thematic standpoint and just in terms of how visually beautiful it was, and the soundtrack and everything about that was just so well done. But I definitely didn't find myself being that engrossed in the story, and I wasn't that entertained by it. Like, it's not a movie I think I would rewatch. And then Shang-Chi is kind of the opposite, where like it's a very entertaining, fun, crazy, action-packed movie. I mean, it's a Marvel movie, that's kind of how they usually are. But I don't really appreciate it nearly as much because it just feels like another formulaic Marvel movie. It doesn't really do anything that different, but it is really different in terms of some of the choreographed action sequences that I would say are some of the best from any Marvel movie. Some really awesome martial arts work. So both these movies I enjoy. I just don't like them as much as my top 10 spots. So yeah, let's get into the actual top 10 now. Number 10 is a movie I actually just watched literally a few hours ago, which I did record a reaction to it, so that will be going up on my channel within the next few weeks, and that is Last Night in Soho from Edgar Wright. So I was looking forward to this movie for a while because I saw the trailers and I thought it looked really interesting. It had this really awesome classical 60s vibe to it, and I just thought it looked interesting. It was a horror movie, I think, at least that's what I assumed it was, and after watching it, definitely, yes, it was a horror movie, and I loved it. I didn't love it as much as I was hoping I would. I think I liked the trailers a little bit more, so I was kind of expecting to be like a top 5 movie for me, but it was a little bit lower, but it was still an incredible film, especially in terms of how visually beautiful it was. The vibrant colors that were just radiating off of this film was incredible. I loved all of that. The aesthetic as well, it's all taking place in London. You get to see London in the 60s and you get to see London present day, and it's definitely a noticeable difference. But the story is really what got me the most interested. It's kind of like almost like Nightmare on Elm Street-esque, where this girl is dreaming and her dreams are kind of, they feel real to her, and they're kind of giving her these visions that she gets throughout, even when she's awake. And it's all because she's in this one house that she stays in, and she gets all these visions of this past girl who was involved in all these, was trying to get involved in like the singing industry type thing, but she ends up getting involved in some other stuff because of this guy who kind of treats her very poorly, and it's not really seen as that like that at first, and eventually she thinks there's this murder going on, and she starts to like try to piece together what is actually happened back then, and she starts to see people who she thinks might be involved with that in the present day. And there's a lot of interesting topics that go around with this, and I had a blast with this. It was definitely like a mystery type story that eventually unfolded in the end, and I loved the resolution of this film. I loved the answers that it gave. I thought it was all very well done. So yeah, this is a solid movie. I'm glad I watched it. I'm glad a lot of you guys recommended it as well. And that's my number 10 spot. Number 9 is going to be a movie that I doubt many of you even have heard of, and that's Run, Hide, Fight. This is actually the first movie I watched in 2021. It came out very early January, and I only heard about it because there was a lot of controversy surrounding it, and I was like, okay, anything controversial is kind of entertaining to look into. So I was like, all right, I'm gonna look into this and see what it is. And there's two reasons why it was so controversial. First of all, it is a movie about a school shooting. So of course that's gonna automatically get people like, a lot of people might say that's not something we should have movies about. Other people might say it's not a big deal. But the other big part of this controversy was the fact that it was actually only published on a news platform site rather than being published, on like other streaming platforms. It was on a conservative news platform site, I believe the Daily Wire. And so people who obviously are against that viewpoint are automatically going to be like, okay, screw this movie, I'm not watching it. And even people like me who just don't really care about politics, and I'm like, I don't really want to subscribe to a newsletter from a political site just to watch a movie. But I was hearing a lot of good things about the movie, so I was like, screw it, I'm gonna do it anyways. And I'm glad I did, because I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. I'm not the type of person who thinks that movies need to continuously censor things that people deem too controversial for film. I think filmmakers should be able to do whatever they want because we choose to watch these things. You know what I mean? That's why I'm completely okay with having a movie like this, because yes, this is something that is going to kind of upset a lot of people in terms of something that people just aren't going to want to watch. And I don't blame them. I mean, it's a very, very sensitive topic, and if you're not something that's not something you want to watch, you don't watch it. You know what I mean? It's not like this movie's not advertising itself as what it is. It was advertising itself as being a movie about school shootings. So if you're not, you don't want to see any of that, you don't want to bother, then just don't watch the movie. I get very upset with school shootings. I think pretty much any normal person would, but it's still a movie at the end of the day. So a lot of things upset me in the real world, but I'm watching a movie, I know it's fake, so I'm like, okay, it's all right. It's just a movie. But this movie actually, in my opinion, handled the situation pretty well. It wasn't making light of the situation. It wasn't like making a joke out of it. It was all around a very serious movie about a school shooting. It does play it off to be a bit Hollywood-esque because essentially this movie is Die Hard, but in a school. I'll be honest, that's literally what it is. It's not, there's no, around that. It literally is Die Hard, but in a school. And I enjoyed it. You have this badass character who is the lead of the film, and she's awesome. So she is the Bruce Willis, the John McClane of this movie. And the way it plays out, yes, it's very similar to Die Hard again. There's a lot of Die Hard type movies out there. I don't call them ripoffs. I just call them, hey, this movie took inspiration from Die Hard and decided to be a similar Die Hard movie. And guess what? It works. Just because it's not a completely original idea doesn't mean it can't work. But what I think works so well is that everything about it feels kind of real. Like, I feel like I haven't been involved in a school shooting, but I feel like if it were to happen, there are a lot of things in this movie that do happen that I feel like could play out in that same way, but not completely. There's a couple of things that are a little like, that's probably not something that would happen, or this would happen this way, most likely. But the way it plays out, I really enjoyed. It had a lot of good characters and a lot of good character motives and a lot of interesting stories and themes present in the film. So I enjoyed it regardless of all the controversy. I think you could tell it's probably a damn good movie with how much audience and critics disagree on this film. If you want to watch it yourself, I have no idea where it's available today. If it's still only available on that site, that's unfortunate, because this movie I think would have been a much bigger hit if it was readily available on other streaming platforms. But oh well, you gotta subscribe to a random ass newsletter or thing that I don't think many people really care to subscribe to. Number 8 is going to be Godzilla vs. Kong. So this is a movie I wasn't really looking forward to before 2021 because I haven't seen the other Godzilla movies. I have seen the other King Kong movies, but I was like, all right, I gotta watch, the Godzilla movies, and I watched those early to 2021, and I loved them. So I was really looking forward to this in March, and it did not disappoint. I was a big fan of Godzilla vs. Kong. It definitely wasn't going in the direction that I thought it was going to go. It was much more just action-packed pretty much all the way through. It was a pretty short movie, and they didn't spend much time focusing on the characters, which I think was a big complaint about the other movies, is that they focused too much on the characters. So I kind of understand why majority of the movie was literally just Godzilla and King Kong fighting each other. But holy shit, is that entertaining. Like, I loved the action scenes in this movie, and then you see the very end with Mechagodzilla was So cool, man. So if you're looking for just a fun, action-packed movie with monsters fighting each other, like, this movie provides. I don't really think this movie is going to give you any deep themes or anything like that, anything, you know, heartfelt, like, oh my god, this is an emotional masterpiece. This is literally just a movie to watch for fun, and I think that's okay. I don't think every movie necessarily has to be good for the same exact reasons. Some movies can just be good because they're just really damn fun, and I think this movie handles that very well. The CGI and all that they're using, it looks amazing. Like, it looks almost lifelike, and it's really incredible how technology has advanced to be able to do stuff like that, where we can see Godzilla and Kong fighting each other and for it to look like it's actually happening, like in a real city for a lot of it. I'll be completely honest, the CGI in this movie is pretty stellar, so definitely enjoyed this movie a lot. Number 7 is going to be The Suicide Squad from James Gunn. So this was a movie that I was looking forward to a lot. It was my number 3 most anticipated movie of 2021 going into the year, and I kind of expected to love it, and I did. I didn't like it as much as I thought I would, though. I mean, it was my number 3 most anticipated, and it wasn't my top 3 of this year. It was top 7, so I definitely was a little bit lower than I was personally hoping. But that doesn't change the fact that it was incredible. Now, it's definitely not trying to win any awards in terms of being the most, you know, gritty, dark, serious comic book movies out there, like, you know, you would expect from an R-rated DC movie. Rather, it's in the opposite direction, kind of like a movie like Deadpool, where it's just there for really dark humor and just insanity. And it provides that very well. James Gunn is the king of doing stuff like that. You know, Guardians of the Galaxy, although PG-13, still feels in a lot of ways like it has a lot of mature and dark humor. So letting James Gunn just go crazy with an R rating in this film was the best thing they could have done. And also, you have a lot of just awesome action sequences that they're able to show a lot of gore because of it. And I think it adds a lot to the action when you show a lot of gore, because these are villains. You know, they're going to be killing people, they're going to be blowing people up, they're going to be doing all sorts of stuff. So it's only right to kind of do that. The best thing about this movie, though, is the cast. You have a stellar cast. Obviously, Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn was a great part of the movie. You have John Cena as Peacemaker, which I was not expecting to love him, but I did, and I'm very excited for that Peacemaker show just because of him. Idris Elba as Bloodsport was fantastic, and all the other characters as well. You got King Shark, Ratcatcher 2, the Polka Dot Man. All were just some great additions to this film, and I was definitely hoping to see a lot of the other actors have bigger roles in the film, like Pete Davidson as well as Michael Rooker, and they were unfortunately only in it for a few minutes. But I don't care, because the characters that were there for the whole thing were a lot of fun, and you have a giant starfish villain that looked ridiculous, but it actually worked for the film somehow. Somehow they managed to make it all work, and it made for one of the best movies of 2021, and in my opinion, it's like within my top 30, top 25 favorite comic book movies of all time, just from how batshit crazy fun it was. So James Gunn, you did a great job. I would love to see you do another Suicide Squad movie. Personally, I would love a Suicide Squad versus Evil Superman type deal. That would be cool, but I don't know, maybe we'll never get that. We are getting that, I think, as a video game soon. I think that's a new video game coming up. I would love to see a movie like that. That'd be cool. I don't know, just my opinion. Number 6, Nobody. So Nobody was also within my top 10 most anticipated of 2021. So thankfully, it did not disappoint. I went into this movie not really knowing exactly what to expect, because the trailers blew me away. Like, that's what got me to want to watch this, is because the trailers looked so much fun. It looked like Bob Odenkirk basically being John Wick, right? And that is enough for me to be like, yes, I want to watch this movie. So I actually saw this before even seeing any John Wick movies, because I haven't watched John Wick movies until recently, but I obviously knew of the idea of John Wick, and that to me was interesting enough to see Bob Odenkirk do that, of all people, because I love Bob Odenkirk, of course, in Breaking Bad. So I was like, this is going to be a blast. Let's go watch it. And I watched it in theaters twice, actually, and I just recently watched it again on DVD and Blu-ray, or not DVD, Blu-ray, same thing, whatever you want to call it. I love this movie. My only negative was the ending. I did not like the last 10 to 15 minutes of the movie. I kind of wanted them to stick to the sort of gritty feel that it had, but it kind of went just balls to the walls crazy at the end, where it was kind of borderline ridiculous. But it felt like a typical 80s action movie in that way, where things are a bit over the top and crazy. And it definitely does feel like an 80s action movie through and through, even with the villain. The villain is like a just cliche 80s action villain, a Russian guy from, leading a Russian mob. And it works perfectly. But my favorite thing about this movie is how gritty a lot of it feels, especially that bus fight scene. It's not like John Wick. Well, I mean, John Wick fight scenes are amazing, don't get me wrong, but a lot of the times John Wick is kicking ass for like the whole time, and he's rarely getting his ass kicked. He does sometimes, but he's rarely getting his ass kicked. But in this fight, Bob Odenkirk's character, his name is Hutch, is getting his ass kicked for a lot of it. Like, he's taken a lot of hits, and they're brutal hits too, and he's just messed up, but he's taking all of these guys out regardless, because he is a really damn good fighter, and it's very brutal and visceral. It's not all about the, crazy dance type choreography. It's just really gritty, realistic choreography where people are just doing some brutal shit to each other, like knives getting stabbed into legs and stuff, him whipping out that the pole from the bus and just knocking the dude in the neck with it, and then he has to like cut his neck open to put the straw in to keep him alive. Stuff like that's awesome. You have scenes with car chases that are really beautifully executed. You have the one scene with the house invasion where he's just taking guys out who have like these giant ass machine guns, and he's just kind of grabbing them and like kicking them through walls and stuff. It is one of the most fun movies that I've seen in a while in terms of action-packed movies, and I would love to see a sequel to this. They kind of open up for a sequel the way the movie ends, so I could see it happening, and I would love it. I would love a crossover with this and John Wick, actually. Bob Odenkirk and John Wick, that shit would be awesome. So I thoroughly enjoyed this movie. Really no complaints other than the ending, and everything else was just a lot of fun. Really good music too. Very stylish movie, very specific classic aesthetic to it, even though it takes place in modern day. So great movie. So far this list has been like all 8 to 9 out of 10 type movies, but everything going forward in the top 5 here are movies that I consider to be like at least 9.5 movies. These are all really high tier movies that I loved, like completely loved. Number 5 is going to be A Quiet Place Part 2. So unfortunately, I did not record a reaction to this. I did record a reaction to the first A Quiet Place film that is available on this channel, of course. But the sequel, I saw it in theaters, actually. I did not get a chance to see it on VOD, which some people wanted me to, but I wanted to see it in theaters as soon as I could. So I did, and I loved it. I did not like it more than the first one. It's slightly below the first one. The first one I love a lot. It's one of my favorite horror movies ever. But this one, just a little bit less, just because it didn't have that same appeal that I feel like the first one had. But this one still nails a lot of what the first one did. It is very much a part 2. It is not really a sequel. It's literally a continuation of the same story. It starts right where the first one left off, and I think that works very well. And it's great because the style is all the same. The directing choices and even the soundtrack is very similar. Like, they really make it a point to show that it is just a continuation of the story and not a whole new chapter, really, which is exactly what it should be, in my opinion. And I really like how they were able to accomplish that so effectively. But it also still expands on the story so damn well. We get to see more areas, we get to see more things, especially with the island that they find later in the film, and I love that idea. Like, what are you going to do with this universe? We explored a lot of it in the first one, but when you really think about it, there's so much more questions that me and many other people have about this universe. So you would need a sequel for something like this. You desperately need a sequel. I could see this being like a full-on TV series, to be honest, with how it's structured. But I think it's okay just getting, 3 films. I believe we are getting a part 3. I'm not exactly sure when that's coming out or what's, the deal with that, but we need a part 3, obviously, because this needs to be expanded even further. And I love how they were able to kind of find certain effective ways of taking these alien monster thingies out. And just like the first one, I love this universe and these monsters and how they're designed, because they're so interesting. It's such a scary enemy to go against, because there's not really many ways to save yourself except for the way that they actually learn, and that they're trying to kind of share that way with everyone else so everyone else can be safe. And that's kind of their goal. And I believe in the third one, they're probably going to actually try to make this a worldwide public thing where they can let everyone know that this is how you effectively take these monsters out, because obviously not a lot of people are going to know how to do that. They only know how to do it because the one daughter was deaf, so she had the earpiece, and therefore they had the frequency thing that could affect it. But otherwise, they wouldn't have known. So I love this movie, and I love how it expands on the first one. I think one of the best parts of it was Cillian Murphy. I love him as an actor, and him being in this one was a great replacement for John Krasinski, because he was a great part of the first one, but since he's obviously not able to be in this one because he died in the first one, well, he was in, the flashback scenes, and it was awesome to see him there. But I think having, Cillian Murphy be replacement was perfect, because he's, in my opinion, even a better actor. So that plays out just fine. And Emily Blunt is still just as good in this one as she was in the first one. I really have no complaints. This is a fantastic movie. I loved it. And number 4 is going to be Malignant, directed by James Wan. So Malignant was a movie that I was also looking forward to, but not before, maybe in the summer I saw a trailer for it. I was like, oh, this looks interesting. I think James Wan made a really solid comic book movie, so he might make a good horror movie as well. I don't know. I didn't see The Conjuring at this point, so I had no idea what his abilities would be like for that. And I just said, screw it, let's do it for a reaction video. And I actually recorded a reaction video. If you want to see that, it's up on the channel. And I had a blast. Definitely one of the funnest reaction videos I've ever done, because this movie was so much fun. It is a very campy 80s horror movie. Well, it's not from the 80s, but it feels like an 80s horror movie. It doesn't take place in the 80s either. But in terms of the style of how it's done, it does not feel like your typical modern horror film, which is why I think I loved it so much. It felt so different. Everything from the music to the directing choices to the style, very 80s to me. And that really was awesome. It felt like a love letter to horror fans in a lot of ways, because it kind of went with almost every genre of horror you can think of. I mean, it had elements of a slasher film in there, obviously, because, Gabriel basically is a slasher icon at this point. It had some elements of paranormal ghost movies because of the beginning. It almost made you think that this was a ghost movie at some points. There was aspects of psychological thrillers in there, body horror even. It's incredible how they're able to tell this story in such a structure that I honestly, look, people have told me that it was predictable and that they saw it coming, and that's fine if you saw it that way, but personally for me, I had no idea that twist was coming. I had absolutely no idea, and I'm glad I wasn't the only one, because I know there was a lot of other people who felt the same way. And that is what a really good movie usually can do, is if it's able to really put you in a direction where it's not tricking you to think a certain way, it's just organically playing a story out, where it just so happens that you kind of miss a detail here and there, and you're like, holy shit, that is an incredible twist. And this movie does that. This movie does that very, very well. And yes, it goes crazy. It goes over the top. It's not really a grounded horror film in any way, shape, or form. But I don't care, because it was so much damn fun. I mean, that scene when she's pulling the Gabriel shit out of her head, and he comes out, and then she's attacking everyone in the cell, and then she goes to the rest of the police precinct, and she's just slicing people up. Well, I guess he at that point, because that was Gabriel doing that. That was just some of the most awesome action I've seen in a horror film. And I'm sorry, I was in love with every second of it. And even just the story itself, I was completely interested in. I was interested in this character and her relation to Gabriel and why she has this relation to him. And I was very interested in this story of this weird anomaly of a medical case, I guess you can call it. And yeah, this is without a doubt one of my favorite horror films, probably of all time. I think it's in my top 10 favorite horror films of all time. I gotta do a video ranking my top 10 favorite horror films, but I did top 10 horror franchises, but I just want to do horror in general, just films. I think it's in my top 10. I really loved it, and I'm glad I'm not the only one, because I do see a lot of other people appreciating it on the internet as well. And I think you have to go into this movie realizing that yes, it is a campier movie. You're not really supposed to take it that seriously, but you can still take certain elements of the story seriously, because yes, there are some serious things there. It's just, as a whole, it is way campier than most other modern horror movies would normally be. Number 3 is going to be Zack Snyder's Justice League. So I know you guys probably know this already because I've talked about this a lot. I did a reaction to it. I did a ranking of all the comic book films that I've ever seen recently, and I talk about it there. But yes, this movie is phenomenal to me. It is a 4-hour-long movie, yet it still manages to make me intrigued in it every second of the way. And that's not very common. It's very difficult to do that for a film, to make you interested in it for a full 4 hours and never get bored. And this movie does it very well. It's a perfect Justice League movie. It very well establishes all of these characters, like especially Flash and Cyborg, without even like trying really. Like they only have like 1 or 2 scenes to develop them, and then I'm already interested in them because those scenes are so well done. And compared to the previous Justice League film, I mean, it's like night and day difference. Like this one's actually able to get you to be invested in what's going on, whereas the other one's just not. The soundtrack is amazing here. The action is incredible. They were able to give it an R rating, so there was actual brutality to the action. Steppenwolf is an incredible villain here. He looks awesome, and his motivations make more sense with him trying to please Darkseid. I loved every second of that, and Steppenwolf was really intimidating. Seeing him just take out the Amazonians in that one scene, just like take the horses and just demolish them on the floor. Night and day difference in terms of his overall appeal, in my opinion. He actually feels like a terrifying villain in this one, which in Justice League he wasn't. So that's great. And even just the other characters like Wonder Woman, Batman, Superman, they feel much more serious here. And the other one, they're making jokes every other second, really stupid jokes too that aren't even funny. In this one, they actually feel serious. Aquaman too. And they have a good part in the story. They all do something important at one point or another in the film. And it, again, keeps me invested the whole way through. And there's a lot of awesome Easter eggs in this movie that they throw in because, you know, Zack Snyder said, whatever, it's not releasing in theaters. People can watch it in parts if they want to. So I'm literally just going to throw everything I could possibly throw into this movie. And he does it successfully. And the things that he does throw in, I am enjoying. Like the scene with Jared Leto's Joker was a nice inclusion to the film. It didn't need to be there. Definitely didn't need to be there. If you were going to release this in theaters, yeah, you don't need that scene. But it's a nice little treat for us to see more content. Because, yeah, a lot of movies have a lot of work put into it, and a lot of times a lot of scenes are deleted just for the sake of the theater experience, because the theater experience can't be too long because people don't want to sit there in the theaters for more than 2.5 hours usually. But when you're watching it at home, it don't matter. You can pause whenever you want. So he's like, whatever, we'll throw in as much as we can. And I think that's one of the reasons this movie was as successful as it was and was as enjoyable as it was. And it makes me want to see more of the Snyderverse expanded upon. I want to see a sequel to this. It's probably not going to happen, but I want to. At the very least, a Man of Steel 2 or something. I know we're getting more DCEU content, but I want to see more Snyder DCEU content, specifically in this Zack Snyder's Justice League universe. So it's unfortunate we probably won't get it, but this movie, one of the best times of this year, one of the best movies of this year. I really enjoyed my time watching it. Number 2 is a movie I don't think I've ever talked about on this channel, other than maybe once on a live stream. I probably mentioned it or something. Not a movie that many people talk about. I don't think people like this movie that much, to be honest. I don't really hear it being praised. It's usually just kind of an overlooked movie that no one really gives a shit about. But I watched it this summer, just on a whim, just randomly. I was just chilling. I was on vacation, I think, and one of the mornings I was just like, I'm gonna put on a random movie that looks interesting, and it was a movie that I was looking forward to, but I just didn't really care that much. I was like, yeah, whatever, I'll watch it, I'll see what it's about. And that is The Tomorrow War. The Tomorrow War is such a damn good movie. All of the criticisms I've heard about it have all been so just lazy criticism. It's the same criticism you'll always hear. It's, oh, I've seen this before. This is a very, you know, cliche movie. It's just like Terminator and Aliens had a baby. It's nothing special. okay, sure, like that, but that's not the point. Not every movie has to be groundbreaking. Not every movie has to do something completely different that we've never seen before. Yes, this is a very cliche action sci-fi movie. Yes, it's not doing anything that different. Yes, it's not breaking any new ground. It's not telling a story that's gonna make you sit there and go, holy shit, I gotta rethink my whole life. Not every movie needs to do that. I hate these just insanely critical people who feel like every movie needs to be like freaking Shawshank Redemption. Like, no, they don't all have to do that. You can have movies like this, and The Tomorrow War is that. So of course this stars Chris Pratt. I love Chris Pratt and pretty much everything he does, so I mean, I knew I was gonna enjoy his, you know, part in this film, and so he's always a win. One of my favorite things was how large scale the action was. You have some really solid alien action sequences. Like, I think this is one of the best alien movies I've ever seen. I wouldn't say it's better than Aliens, but it's close. Like, I'm not lying, it's close to, it's almost as good as Aliens. Like, y'all might think I'm crazy for saying that, but I think it's almost as good as Aliens. The movie surprisingly had some really emotional touches to it because it had this big theme of family that was heavily present in the film. There's a lot of time travel going on because what the whole movie's about. The movie's literally about time traveling to the future in order to stop a war that's going on against these aliens. And I really like how they have this relationship between Chris Pratt and his daughter in this film, and his daughter's older in the future, and he has to lose her. He realizes that we can't save everyone to win this war. It's very similar to Terminator in that way, yes, so it's not original or anything in that idea, but it is executed very well, I would say, this idea, and I really enjoy how the idea is presented. And then we even get more things going on with this story, because then you get sent back to, you know, the present, and his relationship with his father is kind of growing after he has to lose his daughter in another timeline. Like, it's not his daughter, the one that he's with in his own timeline, it's his daughter from a future timeline, and he has to lose her because it's the only way they can win the war is by losing her. But he's like, wait, but you're gonna be dead then, even if my actual daughter is not. It's very interesting how they play this theme of sacrifice and family. Really, it's all about that. So surprisingly emotional. The soundtrack was stellar, by the way. I just have to add that. I mean, all these movies here have some really damn good soundtracks, to be honest, but this one especially. So many unique locations too that they go to. Like, there's very unique locations. You have, you know, the Miami. I believe they're in Miami. I can't remember exactly what city it was, but I think it was Miami, which was a really war-torn, really aesthetically pleasing city. And then you have scenes that go to this base that's in like this middle of the ocean type thing. It's just really crazy futuristic base. You have scenes in like the jungle at one point. You have scenes later in, you know, the snowy mountains where they actually go find where this ship was holding all these aliens. Or no, it was like a ship that was like melted underground with all the aliens, which was really cool. So this is just, to me, one of the best alien movies out there. If you haven't seen it, please go do yourself a favor and go watch it. It's on Amazon Prime. It should still be there. I'm not sure if they removed it or not, but yes, this is, to me, one of the best movies of 2021, and it was my favorite movie of 2021 for a while, until number 1 came out. And I'm sure you all know which one this is. I know it's not a very original number 1 to have, but yes, it's Spider-Man No Way Home. Spider-Man No Way Home is my favorite movie of this year. I mean, I'm a Spider-Man fanboy. It's inevitable that that was going to happen, but to be fair, it has to be a good movie for me to still want to say it's number 1. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not just going to give it number 1 because it's Spider-Man. You know what I mean? I didn't like Spider-Man Far From Home that much. I wouldn't say Far From Home was my favorite movie of 2019, for example. So just because Spider-Man is not the reason it's this high. But, of course, this movie is really special to Spider-Man fans for a lot of reasons. Yes, there's a lot of nostalgia baiting here. I will agree. They do a lot of nostalgia baiting. But it's done well to the point where I don't mind it. And also, the story is still really good. It's not like nostalgia that gets in the way of the story. Like Rise of Skywalker, for example. Like, you bring back Palpatine. You don't really explain it all that well. That is nostalgia kind of getting in the way of the story and not making the story any better. But here, there's not that many plot holes where I'm like bothered by it, where I'm like, what the hell's going on there? There's a couple things here and there that I'm a little bothered by, but for the most part, not really. I think for the most part, the characters are handled well. Spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the movie, for Toby and Andrew's return, I think those are handled perfectly. I don't have any issues with those characters returning and how they're handled. The villains, though, I only really enjoyed Green Goblin and maybe Doc Ock more than their original versions. I originally said I enjoyed Electro more than the original, but after rewatching The Amazing Spider-Man 2, I actually think I prefer The Amazing Spider-Man 2's Electro. And then Lizard and Sandman were just pretty bad in this movie, to be honest. I just think that was one of the worst things about the movie. But regardless, everything else was really well done. Again, spoiler alert, Aunt May's death was one of the best scenes in the entire MCU, and the way it was handled, and especially the aftermath of that, and how it carries on to the rest of the film, and the way this kind of redeems MCU's Peter Parker for me, and the way that it resets pretty much everything. It's like a full-on origin story almost, because we get a Peter who's willing to make this monumental sacrifice where everyone forgets who he is. So he's clearly not doing this for, the heroic attention, like, oh, I'm doing this so people love me and stuff, he's doing he's doing what's good because he knows it's his responsibility, which is, of course, that's the whole meaning of Spider-Man. With great power comes great responsibility. It's the whole meaning of Spider-Man, and this movie presents that so damn well and effectively, and you have the other Spider-Man there to witness it, and we get to see some awesome moments with those. Toby gets to redeem himself, where he's able to stop this version of Green Goblin from dying, where he wasn't able to do that prior. And then Andrew's able to save MJ, where he wasn't able to save Gwen before. Like, you do have these character moments that just, to me, were really fulfilling and satisfying, and it made for a great time in theaters. This is my favorite theater experience of all time. I loved watching this with my friends in the theaters. We had just a blast. People were screaming and having a lot of fun, and I'm never going to forget this movie for what it did. Even though it's definitely not my favorite Spider-Man, Spider-Man 2 is still my favorite, but I really enjoyed it. I'm not going to talk about this movie that much more because I've already talked about this movie way too much this past couple weeks. I've done tons of reviews, tons of videos on it, so go check those out. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know your lists in the comment section below. Again, I'm going to be doing my top 10 most anticipated movies of 2022 following this video, probably within a couple days. That'll be a lot of fun. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. I'll see you in my next one. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Peace out.